Hey guys, what's going on? Banana156 here with another video. And yeah, today I want to talk about the Tetris movie that came out just not that long ago. But first, I just want to say thank you guys for the support on the videos. The videos have been doing really well, like much better than I thought they would. So yeah, thank you guys for supporting the videos, and yeah, awesome. Just keep doing what you're doing. I'm loving making these videos, and I'm really happy you're supporting them. But yeah, so today I want to talk about the Tetris movie. So the Tetris movie came out in March or April, I believe. I don't really remember, but I remember watching it and just thinking it was just a really fun movie. So now I will talk about more serious stuff about the movie, but first I just want to talk about how just fun it was. So it was the story of one of the co-founders of the Tetris company, where he was the manager of a software company, where he was trying to make a name for himself and make a living for his family by making video games in the early 90s or 80s, 90s or 80s, somewhere around there. And yeah, and it was just fun. Like, it was a really serious and could be a really boring movie, as much of it was about licensing and getting rights to produce arcade machines or handheld game devices, or all of it can be very boring, but the directors and writers did a phenomenal job, and they made it a very interesting movie to watch, and really entertaining and just really fun. And not to mention the editing and everything like that was just really amazing. Like in the car chase, when the main characters are running away from the Russians to the airport, how it switches between this like Tetris old video gaming style and like the actual car driving away. It's just phenomenal and really fun to watch, and I really do recommend that you guys go and watch it. But yeah, this movie was absolutely incredible, but it wasn't just incredible because it was fun to watch. It was incredible just because of how well it portrayed the way the situation was, and how well it portrayed certain things that were displayed in the movie. And two of the main things that it portrays really well are just how difficult licensing was in the Soviet Union, and also how the Soviet Union was beginning to crumble at the end of the late 80s, early 90s, right before the Soviet Union collapsed. And also it portrays life in the Soviet Union, as well as how the Soviet government really functioned back then, and how intrusive they were on everyone's lives. And then finally, I want to talk about how well the movie did at building tension and making us anxious to see what happened next. Before we talk about that, let's first talk about the licensing and how it portrayed the Soviet Union crumbling. So, for much of the movie, it follows our main character as he's attempting to get licensing rights for Tetris so he can sell it in Japan. And to do this, he had to go to the Soviet Union and talk to the company that was producing Tetris at the time. And it was quite interesting, as at this time, the Soviet Union was the Soviet Union and had a completely closed economy, and was really trying hard not to sell any Soviet property to anyone outside the Soviet Union. So with this guy coming in here and trying to get licensing rights, it's obviously quite a difficult process within the Soviet Union. And what made it even more difficult and quite just odd was that he wasn't the only one doing this. We can see that there were two other people trying to get these licensing rights at the same time. The first of which was the guy who got the licensing, or supposedly got the licensing rights first, and he was trying to reobtain them. And then second was this huge media company that was trying to get the licensing rights for everything. And then there's obviously our main character. And we can see that all three of these entities, or not entities, but people representing these media companies and marketing firms trying to get these licensing rights, are going straight at the Soviet Union, trying to get as much licensing rights as they possibly can. And with the Soviet Union being the way it was, they weren't willing to give anything up, and were actually willing to cut the worst deal, one of the worst deals out of the three, in order just to keep the government happy and keep leadership happy. And that also goes into corruption, which I will talk about in a bit, with how the Soviet government was crumbling. And if we look later on into the movie, how they kick our main character out of the Soviet Union, how the leader of the company that was holding Tetris, he had to fax him a last-minute message saying that he did have the rights, he just needed to come back and do all this crap. It was just really quite odd to see how licensing worked there, and it portrays it really well. As with the way licensing worked in the Soviet Union, it was quite accurate to how the movie portrayed it, as Tetris was quite honestly one of the first things that was licensed to outside people in the Soviet Union, and as we can see, that coincided with its collapse. So it does an absolutely phenomenal job at portraying how licensing was so difficult within the Soviet Union. What it also did well was portray just how corrupt the Soviet Union had become and how it had begun to crumble. Now, as we follow our main character throughout, when he's in his journey through the Soviet Union, we can see that he's being constantly watched by KGB. That's nothing new. It's an authoritarian, autocratic nation. They're going to watch. And one of the main guy of the KGB, the entire movie, is actually corrupt the entire time, as he's trying to cut a deal with the big media company that I talked about earlier that was trying to get licensing rights, just so he could get a little bit of the money for himself, because he knew it was all going downhill. And now this shows that there was rampant corruption within the Soviet Union, and shows how corruption led the Soviet government to taking less efficient deals and running less efficiently, which eventually did lead to the people not being happy and the government eventually collapsing. And that is just one example of why the Soviet Union collapsed. But the Tetris movie does a phenomenal job at portraying how corruption can run rampant in these autocratic, failing governments. And then eventually, by the end of the movie, we can see that the Soviet Union does collapse because of these issues. And you can see just how well this movie portrays it. It's really hard to describe. You just have to watch it to understand how, yeah, you can totally imagine this being the Soviet Union. So yeah, but that's not the only thing that this movie portrays incredibly well. It also portrays life in the Soviet Union. Now, throughout the movie, we follow our main character, and he meets the actual creator of Tetris. And we get to see a little glimpse into his life. And we get to hear that his father actually got forcefully moved for selling a book outside of the Soviet Union, and was basically blacklisted, so he couldn't hold any high-level jobs. And that's not all that happened. That happened to the creator of Tetris as well, as by the end of the movie, with all the licensing issues, they began to do the same thing to him, as his family was forced to move, or were being forced to move, and it looked like he was going to get blacklisted once again, like his father did, from all high-level jobs. But that's not the only way it portrayed Soviet life. It also showed how the KGB was constantly spying on our main character and all that jazz, and how at one point his supposed translator kissed him so the KGB could get a picture of it and threatened to send it to his wife, so he could get caught cheating if he doesn't leave the country. And that just shows how autocratic and authoritarian the Soviet Union was, and just how much they invaded their citizens' privacy. And this Tetris movie showed just how invasive the Soviet government could be, and it did a very good job of that. In fact, it even showed how well the Soviet government can be invasive, even outside of the Soviet Union. Because at one point where our main character is in Russia, Soviet ambassadors from the Soviet Union embassy in Japan go to our main character's wife and tell her to call him, or tell her that when he calls her, to tell him to leave the Soviet Union immediately, or something bad will happen. That shows just how relentless and autocratic the Soviet Union was, and how just scary it was to live there. So yeah, the Tetris movie does a phenomenal job at displaying how licensing and how weird it was within the Soviet Union, as well as how the Soviet Union collapsed because of corruption, and how life was so abysmal in the Soviet Union because of their constant surveillance and invasiveness. But what the movie also does well, and this is from a storytelling perspective, is it built up tension incredibly well. So especially in the scenes where they're trying to strike a licensing agreement. I absolutely love these scenes. So we have our three parties trying to get licensing agreements in three different rooms, and we have the leader of the Russian, of that department of the Soviet government, walking in between the rooms as they talk about contracts and negotiate, and he leaves each room without leading on whether he's going to take the agreement or not. And it leads the audience to wonder, what will the Soviet guy do? What deal is he going to take? What side is going to end up getting the licensing rights? And it just builds up tension phenomenally well. It also builds up a great amount of tension in the portion of the movie where our main character goes back to Japan to his family, and the Soviet leader of that government agency sends him a fax telling him what he should do, and then we have to go through knowing that the Soviet Union does not want this licensing deal to go through. But this leader of a government agency is doing everything he can to get it through, and we can just see the tension build and build, wondering if the licensing deal ever gets through. And by the end of the movie, luckily it does for our main characters, and the creator of Tetris gets to move to America with our main character, and from then on, Tetris became one of the biggest games ever. So yeah, this Tetris movie was absolutely phenomenal, and I recommend all of you guys watch it. It was just, from start to finish, it was a great watch. I really recommend it. It's, despite seeming like it could be quite a boring concept, they made it really interesting and made it really fun and interesting to watch. Just phenomenal movie. So yeah, I hope you guys all enjoyed this video. It was really fun to make. I loved watching this Tetris movie. Just loved it. I hope you guys all watch it too. But yeah, once again, thank you guys so much for the support on the recent videos. I never thought they would do as well as they have. But yeah, thank you guys so much for the support. And yeah, remember to like, subscribe, comment, do all that stuff. But yeah, I hope you guys all enjoyed this video, and have a nice day.